Her eyes were wild with fear as she slid onto the bench beside him. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Act like you know me. Act like you love me." James Carter looked up from his daughter's sandbox to find a stranger sitting inches away, her face pale beneath carefully applied makeup. Behind her, a man in a dark jacket scanned the park with predatory focus. In that moment, James made a decision that would change both their lives forever. Hey everyone! If you're enjoying this story so far, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming content that reminds us how unexpected moments can transform our lives. Now, let's dive deeper into James and Eliza's journey. James had been bringing 5-year-old Sophie to this same park every Saturday morning since the divorce. The routine gave them both stability, him a single father struggling to rebuild his life, and Sophie a little girl trying to understand why mommy lived in another state now. Their quiet existence was predictable, safe. Until Eliza crashed into it. "My ex-boyfriend," she explained later, once the man had given up and left. "He doesn't understand that it's over." Her name was Eliza Chen, a kindergarten teacher who'd recently escaped an increasingly controlling relationship. "I'm so sorry to involve you, but thank you. You probably saved me from something terrible today." James should have nodded politely and gone back to his life. Instead, he found himself saying, "Sophie and I usually get ice cream after the park. Would you like to join us?" Sophie, building a lopsided sand castle nearby, looked up with interest. "Can she come, Daddy? Please?" That first ice cream outing became coffee the following weekend. James told himself he was just checking that Eliza was okay. That her ex wasn't still causing problems. But when Sophie asked if Miss Eliza with the pretty laugh could come to the park again, he couldn't find a reason to say no. "I don't know what I'm doing," James confessed to his brother over the phone one night after Sophie was asleep. "I'm not ready for this. After what happened with Melissa. Not every woman is going to abandon her family like she did," his brother replied. "And from what you've told me, this Eliza seems different." Different she was. Where Melissa had found motherhood suffocating, Eliza bloomed around children. She brought sidewalk chalk and taught Sophie how to draw hopscotch patterns. She knew the words to songs James had never heard of. She listened to Sophie's rambling stories with genuine interest. "You're good with her," James said one afternoon as they watched Sophie on the swings. "I have 22 kindergartners. Your daughter is actually quite easy in comparison," Eliza laughed, but then grew serious. "She's wonderful, James. You've done an amazing job with her." The compliment warmed him in places that had been cold for too long. 3 months after their strange first meeting, Eliza's ex-boyfriend returned. They were at a community fair when James spotted him, moving purposefully through the crowd toward them. Without thinking, James slipped his arm around Eliza's waist and pulled her close. "He's here," he murmured against her hair. 9 o'clock. Eliza stiffened but didn't pull away. "What do we do?" "We act like we're in love," James said, remembering her words from that first day. "For real this time." When the ex-boyfriend approached, what he found wasn't a frightened woman he could intimidate, but a family, James holding Eliza's hand, Sophie between them clutching a stuffed animal Eliza had won for her. The man retreated after a tense exchange, but the damage was done. Sophie had questions. "Is Miss Eliza your girlfriend now, Daddy?" she asked that night during bedtime. James hesitated. "Would that be okay with you if she was?" Sophie considered this with the gravity only a 5-year-old could muster. "Does that mean she'll come over more? And maybe make those pancakes with the faces again?" "Maybe," James said, smiling despite himself. "Then it's okay," Sophie declared, as if settling a major diplomatic negotiation. But things weren't that simple. Eliza began pulling away, canceling plans, making excuses. When James finally confronted her, standing on her doorstep in the rain because she wouldn't answer his calls, the truth came pouring out. I'm falling in love with you, she admitted, tears mixing with raindrops on her cheeks. With both of you. And it terrifies me. Why? James asked, his heart hammering. Because I know what it's like to be Sophie. My dad left when I was 6. My mom went through boyfriend after boyfriend, and each time, I got attached. Each time, they left. I can't do that to her. What if I promised you wouldn't have to? James said, reaching for her hand. What if we took this slowly, carefully? What if we built something real? Their first official date was dinner at James's house, with Sophie as their enthusiastic chaperone. Their second was a movie after Sophie's bedtime, with James's brother babysitting. By the 6th month of knowing each other, Eliza had her own drawer in James's bathroom and a special mug in his kitchen cabinet. But the path wasn't smooth. Melissa called from California, suddenly interested in being part of Sophie's life again. James's job faced cutbacks. Eliza's school district implemented changes that left her working longer hours. They argued about schedules, about boundaries, about how much involvement Eliza should have in Sophie's life. I feel like I'm walking a tightrope, Eliza confessed during one particularly difficult week. I'm not her mother, but I'm not just your girlfriend either. I don't know where I fit. You fit with us, James said simply. However that looks. The turning point came unexpectedly. Sophie fell from the monkey bars at school and broke her arm. James was in a meeting across town. Eliza was listed as the emergency contact. She rushed to the hospital, held Sophie's hand through the X-rays, and called James with steady updates. When he finally arrived, breathless and terrified, he found them in the pediatric ward. Sophie was asleep, her small arm in a bright pink cast. Eliza sat beside the bed, reading a book aloud even though Sophie couldn't hear her. You came, he said unnecessarily. Eliza looked up, her eyes tired but clear. Of course I came. I love her. A pause. I love you both. That night, after Sophie was settled at home with pain medication and more stuffed animals than her bed could hold, James took Eliza's hand and led her to the porch swing. I've been thinking, he said, watching the stars appear one by one. About what you said at the hospital. I meant it, Eliza said quietly. I know it hasn't been that long, but... It's been long enough, James interrupted. Long enough for me to know that what started as pretend that day in the park has become the most real thing in my life. He didn't propose that night. Instead, they talked about the future, honestly, openly. About what they wanted, what scared them, what they hoped for. About Sophie, and how to build a family that wouldn't break her heart. 1 year to the day after Eliza had sat down beside him on that park bench, James brought her back to the same spot. Sophie was in on the plan, clutching a small velvet box and practically vibrating with excitement. Remember what you asked me here? James said, taking Eliza's hands in his. I asked you to pretend, she replied, her eyes bright with unshed tears. And now I'm asking you for something real. He nodded to Sophie, who proudly presented the box. Will you be part of our family, officially? Will you marry me? Eliza looked from James to Sophie, who was bouncing on her toes. Can I call you Mama Eliza after? The little girl asked hopefully. Through her tears, Eliza laughed. Yes, she said, answering them both. Yes to everything. They were married in the spring, a small ceremony in the community garden where Eliza volunteered. Sophie served as both flower girl and ring bearer, taking her responsibilities with utmost seriousness. James's brother gave a toast that made everyone laugh and cry in equal measure. To the family that found each other by accident, he concluded, raising his glass. And stayed together on purpose. 2 years later, they welcomed twins, a boy and a girl who had Sophie's smile and Eliza's eyes. The adjustment wasn't easy, there were sleepless nights and stressful days. But there was also joy, multiplied rather than divided by sharing it. On difficult mornings, when the babies were fussy and Sophie was running late for school and the house was chaos, James would sometimes catch Eliza's eye across the kitchen and mouth the words that had brought them together, "Act like you love me." And she would always smile and whisper back, "I don't have to act. Life isn't a fairy tale." James and Eliza faced challenges like any family: health scares, career changes, the everyday friction of two people building a life together. But they faced them as a team, with a foundation built on that strange moment of trust between two strangers in a park. Years later, when Sophie was graduating high school, she included the story in her valedictorian speech. "My family began with a lie that became the truest thing I know," she told her classmates. Sometimes the families we choose are as important as the ones we're born into. Sometimes love starts with pretending, until one day, you realize you don't have to pretend anymore. In the audience, James reached for Eliza's hand, feeling the familiar warmth of her fingers interlacing with his. Their younger children fidgeted in the seats beside them, impatient for the ceremony to end. But James and Eliza sat perfectly still, listening to the daughter they shared tell the story of how they became a family. It had begun with fear and desperation on a park bench. It had grown into something neither of them could have imagined that day, something beautiful, something real, something that had saved them both in ways they were still discovering. "Act like you love me," she had whispered. And he had. And then they both forgot they were acting. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more content that celebrates the unexpected ways love finds us. Share in the comments your own stories of connections that began in unusual circumstances, because sometimes the most beautiful relationships start in the most unexpected ways, and that's how James and Eliza's story became legend in their small community, a testament to how a single moment of kindness can change the trajectory of multiple lives. As Sophie grew older and started dating herself, she often thought about that day in the park. "How did you know you could trust him?" she once asked Eliza while they were preparing Thanksgiving dinner. Eliza paused, knife hovering over the carrots she was chopping. "I didn't," she admitted. "I was terrified. But there was something in his eyes when he looked at you, this fierce protectiveness mixed with such gentle love. I figured anyone who could love their child that completely couldn't be all bad." "Lucky guess," James called from the living room where he was entertaining the twins with a complex block tower. "Lucky us," Eliza corrected, winking at Sophie. The twins, now 10 years old, had heard the story countless times but still demanded it as a bedtime favorite. They'd interrupt with questions: "Were you really scared, Mom?" and "Did Dad really pretend good?" Each telling added new details, new perspectives, until the story became a living thing that grew with their family. When Sophie brought home her first serious boyfriend during college break, James pulled the young man aside. "My daughter learned about love from watching her parents," he said quietly. "So she expects honesty, respect, and partnership. Anything less isn't going to work for her." The boyfriend had nodded solemnly, a little intimidated but impressed. Later, he told Sophie, "Your parents are kind of amazing, you know that?" She did know. She'd watched them weather job losses and health scares, arguments about money and parenting styles. She'd seen them fight, sometimes loudly, but always find their way back to each other. They'd taught her that love wasn't about perfect harmony but about choosing to stay even when it would be easier to walk away. On their 20th anniversary, James surprised Eliza by taking her back to that same park bench. It had been replaced twice over the years, but the location remained the same. He'd arranged for Sophie and the twins to set up a picnic nearby. 20 years ago, you asked me to pretend," he said, sitting beside her in the spot where it all began. "Best acting job I ever did." Eliza laughed, the sound still as captivating to him as it had been that first day. The years had left their marks on both of them, silver threading through her dark hair, laugh lines deepening around his eyes, but when they looked at each other, they still saw the people they'd fallen in love with. "Would you do it again?" she asked, suddenly serious. "Knowing everything, the hard parts, the scary parts?" James didn't hesitate. "In a heartbeat." Every second. Even the worst day with you is better than my best day without you. From across the playground, their children watched them, Sophie now a confident young woman, the twins lanky and growing too fast. 3 lives that might have been entirely different if not for a desperate request and a split-second decision. "They're being mushy again," one of the twins complained loudly enough to be heard. "Good," Sophie replied. "That's how you know it's real." As the sun began to set over the park where their story began, James and Eliza walked hand in hand toward their children and the future they'd built together, a future that had started with pretending and had become the most authentic thing either of them had ever known. In the end, what began as, "act like you love me," had become simply, "I love you," 3 words that had never felt more true, more earned, or more beautiful. As twilight settled over the park, casting long shadows across the playground where their journey began, James and Eliza gathered their family for the walk home. The twins raced ahead, their energy undiminished despite the late hour, while Sophie lingered behind to take a photo of the bench, a memento of the place that had changed everything. "You know," James said softly as they followed the familiar path home, "sometimes I think about how many things had to align perfectly that day. If I'd chosen a different bench, if you'd gone to another park, if I'd been too suspicious to play along. If, Eliza finished with a smile, squeezing his hand. But you didn't, and I didn't, and here we are." Their house was just a few blocks away, the same house where James had raised Sophie alone, now expanded to accommodate their growing family. The porch light glowed welcomingly as they approached, illuminating the wind chimes Eliza had hung the first summer she lived there and the height marks etched into the doorframe tracking 3 children's growth. That night, after the children were asleep and the house had settled into its familiar creaks and sighs, they sat together on the porch swing, the same one where they'd first confessed their love. 20 years had weathered the wood, just as time had weathered them, but both remained strong, enduring. "Do you ever wonder about him?" James asked quietly. "Your ex? The reason we met?" Eliza considered this, her head resting against his shoulder. "Sometimes," she admitted. "Not because I miss him, but because in a strange way, I'm grateful. His darkness led me to your light." "Our light," James corrected, kissing the top of her head. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the distant sounds of their neighborhood, a dog barking, a car passing, the whisper of leaves in the breeze. The ordinary soundtrack to an extraordinary love story. "We should go in," Eliza said eventually, though neither made a move to stand. "In a minute," James replied, unwilling to break the spell of the moment. "I'm still not tired of pretending to love you." Eliza laughed, the sound as bright and clear as it had been 20 years ago. "Neither am I." And as the stars appeared one by one in the night sky above them, they remained there, 2 people who had found in each other exactly what they hadn't known they were looking for, a love that had begun with a desperate whisper and had grown into the truest thing either of them had ever known. The end.